Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Creighton.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And unhappily, our guest isn't here. We're thinking that there may have been a miscommunication by email that we'll have to iron out at some point, but we can't have her on the show today. So we're just kind of chatting between ourselves here about what we could talk about. And Jody Lynn, you came up with a really interesting idea that basically stems out of the conversation we had last week. And I don't know exactly where this comes in, what made you think about this, but I mean, last week we were talking about quantum health. We're talking about the large scale way of looking at all of this abundance stuff and health stuff and so forth. But you got an interesting twist now. Tell people what you were thinking about.
Okay, so I was actually journaling this morning, and one of the things that I realized is that a lot of times we measure our life in terms of money, things, or external events. So if I have money, then it's a perception that I'll have is that I am successful. If my business is, booming, then my perception is I'm successful. There's this external measure.
It's an external validation, really.
That's right. External validation. And this, to tie it back to what we were talking about with Cody last week, it's that we're looking to all of these things outside of ourselves to make us happy, to make us whole, to make us fulfilled. That's kind of a piece that I took away from our conversation.
Sure.
But the realization that we were talking about before we jumped on now here today is that it's a perception, because this is the question. If I said, Walt, I will give you exactly what you want, whether that's $10 million, the perfect relationship, a baby, like fill in the blank with the thing that you want to manifest so bad.
Right.
Everybody that's listening, including you, would say, yes, I'll take it. I'll be happy. I'll be excited. It's going to be the greatest day of my life. Now, if I put this caveat on it and I said, you can have this, whatever this thing is that you want so badly, but tomorrow morning you're not going to wake up, would you take it?
Wow. Yeah. And I wouldn't even want to hesitate. I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess as to what most people would say, although I have my opinion about what that would be. I know in my case, the answer would be no, thank you.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to hazard a guess. I think most people would say no. And when I heard somebody else ask a question similar to this, of, if I give you $10 million today, but the classification or the caveat is that you won't wake up tomorrow morning, will you take it? And these two people on this podcast were like, no, absolutely not. And so I think that that's true. And that begs the question, then is it the most important measure in your life? And the answer I came to was no. It's why is it that it's more important to wake up tomorrow than it is the thing that you say that you want so badly? Because you want to be here for the experience. You want an experience. You want life. Life is about waking up tomorrow morning and experiencing it. And what I realized in that conversation with myself is that most of us in our society today, we don't live our lives like that. Like, the most important thing is the experience. And this ties back to what Cody was saying with the law of rhythm, where our body, and really after the show, we talked about it a lot, Walt, I think our external life, our wallet, will have a disease of the wallet, or a disease of our current reality, if you will, to use those words. We will have that to bring us back into balance, to bring us back into this present moment, where the present moment is the only place where you can experience.
It's true.
Right now, right here. So that's the most important thing.
And I like that. That's really good. In fact, you're reminding me of a story that I picked up today. I went to my physical therapy session for my leg, Achilles, ankle, all that stuff that's been bothering me, and which I'm making good progress on, by the way, which is a good thing.
Yay.
But while I was there, my therapist was telling me a story. She asked me, well, what'd you do for Thanksgiving? My Thanksgiving was pretty quiet. I said, what'd you do? She says, well, our plans got changed at the last minute. And I said, oh, how so? She says, well, she described how where she lived. She and her husband rent from a guy whose son is a good friend of theirs. So they have this family connection going on there. And they were invited to Thanksgiving dinner. But the father, who's the landlord, has been dealing with a lot of medical issues, a lot of health issues, and said, I don't want to do Thanksgiving this year.
Mm.
And he said that until I don't remember what the exact trigger was. There was something that happened that helped him to feel better, that helped him health wise. I don't know. I don't remember it being anything major in terms of like oh, I'm cured or something like that. It wasn't that kind of a deal, but he felt physically better. And as soon as he felt physically better, he changed his mind about Thanksgiving, and apparently invited about 30 people over to the house. Now, this is a guy who's in his 80s. Okay.
Mm.
And he decided he was going to cook dinner for everybody. And he
Wow.
was going to be the main entertainment. He gave them a lecture on something about Mexican archaeology or something like that. He gave them this big soliloquy about all the work that he'd done on that when he was young. And he was like the life of the party, just completely enjoying the whole situation. And the conclusion my therapist came to was he wasn't worried about tomorrow. He wasn't worried about yesterday. He was only interested in right now. Just exactly what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. And you know what else pops into my mind? Well, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
My dad has always said this phrase to me, but like when you enter the world, you come in alone. And when you leave the world, you leave alone. Like meaning you're the only thing that you take with you, both in and out. And I think looking at that man who's 80 years old, it doesn't matter all of the things that he has. He's talking about his experience in the past and the experience right now in the present moment.
Which you actually do take with you, by the way. That's the one thing you do take, I think.
Yeah.
When you transition, you take the experience, you take the knowledge, you take the memory, and you take the existential feeling of what it was like and what you remembered from it and what you got out of it. What you gained.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Reincarnation.
But it does give you, well, yeah, there's that too. But it does give you pause. It gives you perspective to ruminate on what you talked about, which is, why is it important to be focused on what's coming now, what's going on right now, and what is important to experience right now? Because that was really the crux of your question. Do you want to experience this thing that you got, or are you going to be done with your life once you get it? And like you rightfully pointed out, you want to experience it. What's the point of getting it if you don't experience it? There really isn't any.
Absolutely. No.
Yeah.
No, there isn't. And also it's too really poking at how we're so attached to things. Like I can't be happy unless I have this thing, whether it's money, successful business, relationship, a child, whatever it might be. We get so stuck on that. Until I have this, I will not be happy. But asking yourself that question really proves that waking up tomorrow is more important than that thing. Having that experience of still being here, being able to participate. But we rarely treat this present moment as that precious.
And understandably so, because so often our lives are driven by what just happened to us. He completely switched his feelings about Thanksgiving because he felt better. I mean, that was it. That was the kicker. That was the trigger that just changed the whole scenario for him. He felt better. And ultimately, I think that's really what is happening with every experience we're looking at. Regardless of what we're trying to attract into our lives, we're trying to feel better. If I only have this, I'll feel better. If I only experience that, I'll feel better. If this happens, I'll feel better.
That's right. And then you start to look at the perceptions involved with that. So maybe not the health side of things, but maybe so. I don't know.
Sure.
But a lot of times we get stuck in a perception of my life is this, my relationship is this. And it's a perception that we continue to recreate over and over and over again. And then it creates more feelings of resentment, anguish, anger, all of those things that just really build. But what if it's the perception?
It's a chicken and egg
question. You could change it. Yeah.
It's really a chicken or egg situation. And the reason I say that is I'm thinking, for instance, about something I've been experiencing recently. I was just telling you about it before we got started on the show today, but
Mhm.
long story short, I ended up discovering in the last few days that I'd been consuming a lot more sodium than I thought I had been, to the point
Mhm.
where it was physically affecting me. And once I discovered that, I obviously decided to make some changes. And within a day or two, all of a sudden, I'm feeling better again. Right. So there I am.
Mhm.
I have this trigger that made me feel better. And I associated that feeling better with, well, I made a physical change. Right. I cut down on the sodium and suddenly my body started to respond, which it is. It's responding beautifully. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. But here's the catch. Is it the body being healthy that I want, or is it the experience of the body that that feels healthy that I want? And that's really what was at the crux of your question. Is it the
Yeah.
experience that you want, or is it the actual healthy body?
Well, and well, back to chicken and egg. How do you know? Like, unless you have a healthy body, how do you know what one feels like?
Yeah, that's
Until you have an
the driver,
unhealthy body,
right?
right?
Yeah,
You know, when you have an unhealthy body, then you realize, oh shit, I should have valued my
yeah,
healthy body. Whoops.
yeah. Well, that's why we live in this world of polarity, right? To show
Yeah.
us what we don't like, so that once we see what we don't, this is actually, I think, where we trip up. To be perfectly honest, the
Mhm.
world that we live in does a really good job of showing us what we don't like. And we have become experts at identifying. I really don't like that. I don't like, in fact, we devote realms of human endeavor to it. The entire
Mhm.
political realm is about all the things we don't like. The news is about all the things we don't like. Most entertainment, most jokes are about things we don't like. I mean,
Yeah.
we're very, very good at that. You know what the part is that we have a lot of trouble with? Once we identify something that we don't like, flipping it around to decide, well, what do I want instead? We're not so good
Yeah.
at that part.
Not at all. And we're even worse because I think we can start to you get into like personal development and you go to different courses and you start learning and growing and you're like, okay, I think I can do this and I can conceptualize a better life or what I do want.
Mm-hmm.
And but even harder, I think, or what I really struggled with is what makes me happy. Like
Yeah.
now, in this moment, what is something that is exciting, is creates that feeling of joy within me. The first time I ever wrote a list, because that was one of the key codes that I had channeled for abundance, was do more things that make you happy and make a
Mm.
list of what makes you happy so you can put it in front of you and you have a list of I could go and do this or I could go and do that. But like in my average ordinary life, my daily life, what made me happy?
Mm.
I got like 3 things on the list and I was like, huh, I'm stumped. You know,
I have to
I
admit, it
don't
usually
know.
is a rather short. For me, it is a short list too, in terms of the things that if I want to really feel happy, there are number of things I know have worked in the past. But if I want,
Mhm.
a guarantee happy just by doing something, it's a very
Mhm.
short list, and one of them is doing a podcast with a good friend
Yeah.
like you. Um,
Oh,
Not
thank
just
you.
because, yeah, well, not just because it's called your daily dose of happy, but because I'm connecting to you, and ultimately to
Mhm.
all of our listeners too, and to a
Yeah.
guest, and whoever else is joining us on the program. It's the connection that I'm loving. I
Mhm.
experienced that just the other day. I mentioned that I was having this health issue, the sodium being too high and so forth. Finally figured that out. And the day that I figured that out, actually, it was the day after I figured it out. I was still detoxing, so to speak. And I've been dealing with this high sodium for a while. I just only became aware of it relatively recently. So I'm going to detox it for a bit, I think. But you get rid of a lot of it when with sodium. You can expel a lot of it pretty quickly. And yet I had just discovered it that day, so I was still in the very, very early stages of the detox. And so I was kind of lackadaisical and kind of down and so forth. And I got a phone call from a friend who I had talked to in a few weeks, and she and I like to talk regularly. And she says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing all right." So she says, "Wow, you sound terrible." She knows me pretty well, and so we got to talking, and I was telling her what was going on. And as we're talking, I could feel my enthusiasm start to rise. Why? Because I'm
Mhm.
connecting with my friend.
Mhm.
I love
Something you
that.
love to do.
I
Yeah.
love that. It
Yeah.
always works every single time.
Mhm.
So yeah, mine's going to be a short list too, and at the top of the list is going to be connecting to the people I care about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think
Eh,
it's something that we don't think often enough about. Like even just like menial things. Like I like to read. I
mhm.
went through this phase of like I really loved romance novels.
Ah, okay.
and like I don't know, they're not sci-fi. They might be sci-fi. I don't know what category they're in, but like they're what the True Blood series was
Okay.
based on, the Sookie Stackhouse Chronicles. I loved reading them. I loved reading
Mhm.
those books. I loved reading Nicholas Sparks. I just like ate them up. And then there was a point in time where, I was like, book, I don't know, whatever. And then I liked painting.
Mm.
And I think that's another thing that we struggle with as humans in our society is changing our mind. You know,
Mhm.
we just hold ourselves to such a high standard that, oh, well, this should have worked before, or this worked before to make me happy. I enjoyed this. And like now I
Mhm.
have all the stuff. I
Right.
have all the painting stuff and, an easel. And I bought all these things. I invested all this money. And now I'm like, I don't really feel like it. I don't really want to
Mhm.
do that.
Mhm.
And people will, not refuse, but like struggle to be like, okay, on to the next thing. Maybe the next thing is, I don't know, I want to create fireplaces or stonework. I don't know. I don't know what's next, but I'm okay choosing something else when this isn't feeding my soul. And I think people struggle with that.
They do, but it's also what you need to do, because the people who struggle the most, in my observation anyway, are the ones who stay stuck, mainly because they don't, on some level, they feel like they can't get to where they want to get to, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like a giving in. I surrender to this terrible place I'm in. I will never leave it. It's that kind of a thing. Um,
Mhm.
it's the victim mindset, really. It's the
Yeah.
mindset that says this is all out of my control. It's all out of my power. I'm powerless to deal with any of this stuff. Which is just another way of saying I'm powerless to try something new.
Right.
Actually, what it comes down to, I'm powerless to try something new. But that mindset's a tough mindset. It's a really tough
Yeah.
one. And we have different levels of it. I mean, the
Mhm.
one that I was just describing is a pretty severe level, but there are layers to it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you can be a doer, somebody who goes out and does things, and still feel like you're, at least for a short time, stuck on something.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so interesting because I think that there are levels, and I think that maybe that is the duality, that is experiencing the
Mm,
other side, and like recognizing your own power is seeing that part, whatever, whether it's a judgment of somebody else that you're watching, or
mhm,
you're judging yourself because you're stuck,
mm,
something isn't right, quote unquote, in your reality.
right.
Feeling powerless is like one of the first steps. Okay, I'm
Mhm.
powerless, and then now what?
Now what? Yes.
And I think doers, they naturally get out of it faster,
Yeah.
but it also depends on how aware they are of
Mhm.
that said reality. I think it can be deeply stuck. You can be deeply stuck in different areas of your life and not realize it.
I wonder if a lot of what we attract in our lives has to do with us on the inner being level, trying to challenge ourselves to do exactly that, to get unstuck.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
I think a lot.
I think it's probably almost all of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
I think it's
because
all about seeing both the sides, the like the dichotomy of what is the good and the
Mhm,
bad. And like whether you're seeing the good, there's still the other side that lives there that you're not witnessing, that you may, the universe may bring in. This is exactly what Cody was talking about last week. Bring
mhm,
that back in to bring that homeostasis. Well, it
right.
works the same way on the other side too. If you're looking at something as negative or perceiving it as negative, the other side exists too. And
Mhm.
I think that is the experience, coming back to this place of balance.
That place of balance, yeah, that's really what it is. And when you were mentioning what Cody was talking about last week, it's actually been an ongoing conversation, because the guest I had on Monday, June Edward, that was a conversational point with her. The conversation I had with Joel also this week, same deal, that also came up. It comes up a lot, I believe, but it comes up mainly because we as humans are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. We don't
Mhm.
necessarily, it doesn't make the news, it's not something that we're talking about in all our conversations, but we're dealing with it every day.
Mhm.
So now we like to make examples out of people who are really, really stuck there because it clarifies things. They always have it's kind of the black and white thing, right? If it's really black and white, it becomes really clear, really obvious. But most of us live it in the more gray areas. And yet we are living it every day. We're experiencing it every day. It's an ongoing, everyday challenge for us to deal with. So one of the reasons that like the fact that we're talking about these things here on the show is it's kind of a reminder to us, to our audience, to anyone who picks this up and listens to it at a future time, that we are in control even when we don't feel like it. We're in control at all times, even when we don't feel like it. I think we need that reminder.
100%. Yeah.
Because it's scary.
Well,
It's scary otherwise. I mean, because otherwise you're in that trap place, right? That trap mindset. And that trap mindset says, well, no, you can't get out of this. Don't even try. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to be worth it. Just don't go there. That's what the mindset is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're screwed.
You're screwed.
Good luck. You're going to die. Your brain just goes into this like fight or flight response. You're going to die.
Yes.
That's where mine goes every time. No
Life
one's going to
sucks
love
and then
you.
you're
You're going to
dead,
be homeless
right?
and then you're going to die. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly it. And
it's funny.
And maybe it's so interesting because as we're having this conversation, I feel like more things are coming. Like we live our life, like we started this episode, a lot of times outside of ourselves, living for like the big moments,
Yeah.
the big things that happen in our life. And that isn't the majority of our life. That is 10%, or I don't know, whatever percentage it is. The gray moments that you just described, that is the majority. And what if that is the point of experience, is to surrender to that, I don't know, ebb and flow that we move through on a daily basis, and to see how special that is. And maybe that was the real point of that question of you would take waking up over any other thing. So any other thing, whether it's a problem or it's something that you truly desire, so like the negative and the positive side of things, maybe all of those things don't actually matter.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, in the final analysis, no thing matters.
Yeah.
Or to put it another way, all things are matter, but that doesn't mean they are important.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's one of those words that's matter. That's one of those words that can mess you up, because there's matter, the physical thing, and there's matter, I feel good or I feel bad about it. There's two different kinds of matters. But yeah, the struggle that we deal with as we're dealing with all this stuff is, I think it comes down to what we were talking about earlier. It comes down to the fact that we are experiential, and in that experiential nature, we want to experience the next experience to be good. We want the next experience to feel great. That's that feeling better thing. So we're so we really are, in that sense, led by our experiences. But the experiences, like you pointed out, are kind of outside of ourselves. That's where the things are, right? Things are where the experiences happen, right? So we're looking outside of ourselves to feel better inside about experiences that are really within ourselves, but they seem outside of ourselves. No wonder we're confused. Seriously, it's no wonder. It's outside,
but it's inside, but it's outside and inside.
Yeah. Well, we're always looking outside because that's where it feels like everything happens. That's the short. I mean, that's the less confusing way to say it. It always feels like that's where the stuff happens.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the last time that something good happened in your life and you said, "Oh, that happened good inside me"? Yeah, you felt it inside, but did you say that it happened inside you? No, you said it happened outside of you.
No, but you know what? What the interesting thing about this topic that we're talking about is that when something really horrific happens to you and you move through it, most people talk about what happened on the inside.
That's true.
Rather than the outside.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird that we do it with like negative things, but we don't really do it with positive things?
Well, I wonder if that's part of the answer to the question I've kept asking myself over the years, which is, why do we keep focusing on the negative things? Maybe that's the answer, because that's where we're so used to experiencing internally.
Yeah. And if maybe this life is to figure yourself out, to learn, to grow, to like come back to source that is within, to go within. That's why so many crappy things happen to all of us, is to go back in. I don't know.
So that raises the question then, because I mean, as if we state it that way, we lay it out that way, it's pretty clear. Okay, we're just giving too much attention to the stuff we don't like. We need to give more attention to the stuff that we like, and we need to do it within. So the question is, how do we do that?
Well, I come back to what we were talking about last week on whether things are actually good or things are actually bad. Because a lot of times when I've gone within, I'll only speak for me, but I've seen this with lots of our guests too, is like something horrific happens, you go within and you come to this place where you realize that there was a gift in it, there was light in it, that, you know, it's not all rosy. But, you know, maybe 10 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 at least, for me at least, I would say I would go through it again. Because
I love how you went from 10 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 to me. That was a great transition there. I love that one.
Well, I know for sure I would. And I've heard other guests say it. So that's where I was starting. But maybe some people are like, I'd never do that again. But I know that for me in this moment, looking back at all the stuff that's happened in my life, I wouldn't take any of it away, because then I would take away that experience, that what I learned, how I felt, how I've grown. And then, so that brings me to that question of, so in that time frame, now that I'm looking back, I don't see it as bad. I see it as an opportunity to have that growth, an opportunity to learn about myself, an opportunity to love deeper, to, you know, whatever, have more compassion. Like there's a ton of different lessons that I've learned through that. I no longer label it as bad. And maybe so then I ask the question of, is it really bad? Is it really good? But maybe we're not doing that with the good things. We're just smacking a label on the good things, quote unquote, that we perceive. And we go and we experience, we rush through them, but we're not having that same depth of an experience within ourselves as we go through those good moments.
So once again, we're faced with an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy after the fact to look back and see how something worked out great that was really miserable at the time. So we can justify like, well, all right, I'm really glad that happened. I don't want it to happen again, but I'm glad that I got the experience out of that. Yeah. It's not so easy to do when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of the crap, it's crap. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. It feels crappy. It looks crappy. It smells crappy. It's just crap. It's horrible, right? And the last thing you want to do is celebrate it. But that's the challenge. Can we find some way to appreciate the crap when we're in the midst of the crap? That's what I mean when I say it's a no shit moment. It literally is.
Yeah. Yeah.
What am I going to do with this shit?
Yeah.
How am I going to appreciate all this shit going on? That's the hard part. That's the challenge.
Yeah. That's the exercise of life.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's enough to piss you off.
Absolutely.
It really is.
It's maddening. It's maddening. Why would you use this as the teacher?
I mean, how many times, I don't know, I know this is going to be true for me. How many times have I gotten a feeling of, oh yeah, this is somehow working out for the best, even though it feels crappy. Okay. I get that. Why do I have to go through it again? I just do this yesterday with something else. Didn't I do this last Tuesday? I mean, it's like, how many times do I have to go through this?
People are like, till you learn. Yeah. Like, I've already learned. Why am I still learning this?
I feel like the poor sap who says, okay, I get it. Stop already.
It is quite maddening.
It is.
Go through the same cycle over and over again. And then, you know, over and over and over again. And then you think, you know, we take it so personally, like, I did something wrong because I'm experiencing this again. And something that I teach is looking at how the experience is different this time than it was last time, because it's never exactly the same. You learned something the last time, or if you didn't, then maybe it is exactly the same. So you need to learn. But rarely have I found the things that I go through more than once are exactly the same. Like I'm
There's always a
still the
gradation.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm still the link in the chain here. That's
Right.
the constant is me in all of my experiences. But
Right.
who I am in experience 1 versus experience 10 is completely different.
And you gave us a really good point that we kind of glossed over. We should really go back to it, which is I asked the question directly. How do you navigate this? How do you get yourself to go inside and experience the positive stuff and appreciate the positive stuff from the inside rather than purely from the outside? And you pointed out that one of the ways you do it is by feeling it, by
Mhm.
experiencing it all the way through.
Mhm.
And that's actually something I've been practicing lately. I haven't had fortunately, I haven't had any, real traumatic things going on, so I haven't had to put it to the real test in that sense. But, throughout the day, you go through ups and downs, and whenever I've been experiencing the downs, I've been allowing myself to just feel what I feel about that down until it dissipates. And it turns out that's actually a pretty powerful little tool to use because you get through it quickly.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
that's probably
You
one of
move
the
through
worst
it
parts about
so
the negative,
fast.
because you can hang out in that thing forever or long periods of
Mhm.
time anyway when you don't feel it all the way through, and that's when it becomes torture
Yeah.
because it just keeps going and going and going and going. But when you learn to just kinda let it go and just, "All right, I'm going to experience it until it dissipates," it goes away pretty quickly, and then you kinda bob up like that cork on the water, right? You
Yeah.
were on a low wave, and now you hit a high wave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same is true for good experiences because I know that for me, for a long time, I was never in the experience.
Mm.
I was always like, I'm on vacation and like, oh man, like I can't wait to go home so I can go back to work. Or, I'm looking at what I got to do tomorrow. And I often fall back into that pattern
Mm.
of not being here in this moment. And I remember it was like last week or the week before, I was just practicing reveling in
Mhm.
the glory of this time, this day,
Okay.
this moment right here. Like I had my family around and we were doing fun things. And it was like I had to remind myself, like, hey, be happy. Like these are the things that you want to do.
Mm.
So be happy, like be in that moment, like drink it in, take every second in. And that's important.
And there's another clue right there. How do you get yourself to experience the positive side within? You do the same thing as you do with the negatives. You feel it
Yeah.
all the way through. Because
Hmm. Feel it all the way
yes,
through.
that's the essence of being in the now. You feel it. You feel it while it's happening. You
Yeah.
experience it.
Yeah. And I think too, we have to, the thing that we need to do as society and us as humans is let go of two things. Number one, the like, when am I going to be done mantra? When am I going to be done? When you're dead. So let it go.
Mm.
Until you're dead, you're not done. And that it doesn't, I think it's because we've attached so much to that being done. When I'm done, my life will be perfect. And that leads me to number two, there is no perfect.
Mhm.
Because we have this light and dark side, if you will, the yin and the yang. We have duality. So we're going to continue to experience duality as long as we live on this plane. Now, you will experience it differently as you
Mhm.
grow and as you consciously evolve. The bad won't be as bad, and the good won't, like, it'll just kind of stabilize itself. More will be good, I
Mm.
guess, in this perception, quote unquote. But we get so stuck on when will I be done because we have this perception of my life will be perfect once I'm done. No, your life is perfect now in this
Mm.
state of duality where you get to feel both and bring it into this balance point.
I'm reminded of the Abraham Hicks phrase that describes exactly what you just said. Their cliche that I like to quote is, "You'll never get it wrong, and you'll never get it done."
Yeah,
I guess they say you can't
it's
get it
true.
wrong. That's the way they phrase it. You can't get it wrong, and you'll never get it done. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because that's what we're here for is the experience. It's what we
Mhm.
want to be here for. We've
Mhm.
established that early on in today's, call that we want to be here for the experience. So
And by the way,
You-
this is also going to be
Yep.
what we talk about next week, because next week, I don't think I told you, our guest next week is David Strickle. He's going to return to the show and share some time with us.
Ooh,
And he's all
cool.
about the appreciation of all the stuff that goes on, no matter where you're down, up, wherever, that's
Yeah.
his shtick right there. So yeah, we're going to carry on
Yeah.
that conversation for sure next week.
Yeah. So, I mean, just even reframing the like, I'm never going to be done, or when am I going to be done with this? When am I going to learn my lesson? Whatever, right? It's, I get to experience this
Mm.
and see what new nuggets come out of it, what new emotions come out of it, what new depths or heights I can experience within this one pocket of experience. And I
That's a
love
really
how
good
you're
phrase.
practicing.
That
Thank
what
you.
you, I like the fact that you use "I get to,"
I get to.
because I get to turns it into an adventure.
Yeah. And it is, right?
Mm. Well, it
Even
is if
on
we
that.
decide that it is. If we don't
Well,
decide that
yeah.
it is, and it's not, then it's probably a torture chamber. But
Yeah. Yeah,
but if you decide
exactly.
that it's an adventure because you decided.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you're here to learn, why not look at it like it's an adventure?
Mm.
Like I get to learn. I get to see this opportunity. And I love that you're practicing that within every day of moving through those emotions, just really like surrendering to them, if you will. But that is an adventure too. Like, all right, I don't want to do this. Here we go. Like I get to. I'm still alive, so I get to experience this emotion and I get to move through it faster and faster every time. And then, like the things that were so big 10 minutes ago are nothing
I'm
anymore.
gonna I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna layer that on. Not just feeling it through, but I get to feel it through, especially when it's something I don't like.
Yeah.
I wanna see how I respond to that. Because
You
I
let
mean,
me know.
I just know I know myself well enough, and I suspect this is probably true for many people. My first attempt doing that is probably going to be, "Oh, you're such a liar." I get to do this. Oh, yeah, have a great time.
I will. Thank you.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Our brain is so funny.
Well, it's a statement
You're
about
going to hate
how
it.
I'm gonna hate it, right? It's a statement about, how even though our brains are neuroplastic, they are programmed. It's a
Hmm.
statement of the programmability of it. The
Hmm.
neuroplasticity is a statement of how we can change it by doing things like saying, I am going to experience this thing, and I'm psyched that I'm going to experience this thing. This is a good thing. That's the
Yeah.
neuroplastic changing going on. But
Yeah.
the
Well,
neuroplasticity, it still implies that there is a plasticity. There is a set pattern that goes on there. That's what we're trying to shift. That's what we're trying to change, and that's why it feels early on that it's so tough to do
yeah.
this.
Yeah. But we want to. If we go right back to the question that we started with today,
Okay.
if you could have the thing, even if you ask the question, if you could, have all the things that are in your life right now, if you could change it, you have it, whatever, right? But you're not going to wake up tomorrow. Would you choose to have all of those things that you maybe don't like, but you're waking up tomorrow? I think most people would say yes. So
Yeah.
then you're choosing it. You're choosing the experience. And it becomes, I get to, because I want to wake up tomorrow. I want to be here for the experience. Because if you're not going through the experience, then you're dead. I don't think any of us want that.
You're choosing a new experience, but you're also choosing a new perspective.
Yeah.
That's what the power of that example is. It's a different
Yeah.
way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
And it's,
if life is a series of experiences that we're experiencing only in the now, I think we can tack on to it. It's a set of experiences that we're experiencing in the now that keep things interesting because
yeah.
we're switching things around. We're trying new perspectives. We're trying new things. And the only time that it becomes a burden is when we stop trying new things.
Mm-hmm. Or we become adverse to trying new things.
Yeah, well,
I don't want
that's
to.
like the extreme version of not trying new things. Like I not only am I
Yeah.
not trying new things, I am against trying new things. I will never try a new thing. Oh,
Ever again.
that sends chills down my spine. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah, there's
reminds me of this moment. I was in Las Vegas and we were going to jump off the stratosphere. I don't know
Oh,
whose drunk idea this was.
okay.
We were obviously harnessed in, and whatever, you pay money to do it. And I was like, yes, I'm a farm girl. I'm so tough. This is gonna be awesome. I'm not afraid, whatever, right? And there was, I think, like 5 of us or something, maybe 4. And so the first guy goes, second guy goes, and I'm like, pretty high up here. I do not want to do this. I do not want to do this. So I think it was the 4 of us. And there's my friend CJ. He's behind me, and I was like, "You just go on ahead."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No." And I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Are you scared?" And I was like, "Uh-huh." And he's like, "You're not gonna die." And I'm like, "Uh-huh. I just don't want to do this." He's like, "If I go first, you're not going." And I'm like, "Uh-huh. I know." And he's like, "You already paid the money. Are you gonna regret it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, probably." He's like, "Then go ahead." And I'm like, "I don't want to, but fine." Fine. You walk out to the edge, and they're like, "You have to let go of the railing." And I'm like, "I don't want to." They're like, "You have to." And then as soon as I let go, I was actually kind of disappointed.
Really?
Yeah, because the pad beneath your feet goes or whatever, but it's a controlled fall down. So it's like cables on the side and cables above you or whatever. It's like a
Right.
crane drops you down. So it's not an actual free fall. So you don't get that butterfly in your stomach,
Right.
It's like you're floating. And at the time, that's not what I was expecting. So I didn't appreciate it. But I was like, oh, this was easy. I could do this 100 times. That was cakewalk. But it's so funny. Our perception completely changes as soon as we're like, okay, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I had fun. I mean, I just wouldn't pay $150 American. It was a horrible Canadian exchange to do it again. But I got
Yeah,
to.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's funny, but you make a good point, though. It is funny how what we build up in our minds isn't necessarily the way it actually plays out. Because that's really the
Mhm.
essence of what your story is there, that you had built up in your mind probably a very amorphous, indefined fear. And then
Yep.
reality comes along and it really was nothing like what you feared at all.
No. It was great. I mean, you saw it. I mean, now looking back on the experience, what a way to see Vegas,
Sure.
as
Yeah.
you're falling from the sky, from the highest building, I think it is, or was at that time. That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And I got to
Okay.
do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, good for you. That's good. It reminds me of when my brother went to New Zealand. New Zealand, of course, where bungee jumping became a thing and kind of spread around the world. And while he was there, I found out about it afterward. I was glad he told me afterward, not before. But he told me afterward that he went bungee jumping and he went skydiving on the same day.
Wow.
And I said,
Yeah.
"This is my brother, right? This is the one who never takes chances. This is the same one, right?"
But he did it.
He did. And I was
He
really glad he
got
didn't tell me
to.
about it till afterward, because that way I knew it was going to be okay.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry
No,
about him the whole
I didn't want to
time.
worry about that. No.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And he loved the experience. He loved it. He loved one so much that he did the other one the same day. I mean, I really believe that I don't remember which one he did first, but whichever one he did first, it went so well. He loved it so much that he just felt like, "Oh, let's just do the next one. It's great. I'm feeling good."
Yeah. That's
Which
crazy.
raises another interesting thing. Maybe this is the last thing we talk about today. It's a lot easier to try things when we're feeling good.
Mhm.
It's harder to try things when we're feeling rotten. I think that's one of the reasons we stay stuck, especially if we're depressed or angry or frustrated or something like that.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it's just harder. It's lower vibration, lower density.
Mhm.
So it's like it's going to feel like you're in molasses or something. You're just kind of stuck there. But when
Mhm.
you're feeling good, God, it just seems like everything works. Everything's easy. No problem at all. Yeah, sure. Juggle chainsaws. Yeah, hand them over. Yeah, no problem. Because you feel like, now, hopefully you're not stupid, but that's another topic entirely. But the point is, you
Yeah.
feel better. If you feel better, you feel like you can tackle almost anything.
Yeah.
And the funny
Well,
thing is,
and
if you're feeling better, you're also good. You're likely to have a good experience as a result.
yeah. Well, and I think that comes right back to perception.
Right.
I was having this conversation with myself because I was feeling stuck this last week. Well, for a while now in my coaching business, and, just really wasn't going the way that I wanted. And my friend recommended that I talk to like the soul of my coaching business. Everything has a soul. Of course, my business has a soul. Like everything has energy. So speak to the energy. And what was interesting is that they brought up when I was having this conversation, what downloaded in me was the perception I had of what went well and what hasn't. Because of where I perceive I should be at this point in my business, I was like dumbing down, or I was like playing down all of the beautiful things that have happened because I wasn't where I perceived I should be. And both of those I get to decide what's a win, what's a loss, where I should be, where I'm at now. Like I get to decide how I view this moment, this experience right now. But I think when it's hard to move through things, it's because we're stuck in that perception that nothing's going to change. Like, I don't know what I need to do. I don't, I'm not good at this, or whatever the perception is that is holding them there. We get stuck in that. And then it, is like an avalanche. It keeps, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it feels like you physically can't move.
I'm reminded of a segment from one of the people who was considered the father of science fiction. Most people will say Isaac Asimov, but if you look at the history of science fiction, one of the earliest science fiction writers was a gentleman named Robert Heinlein. And in one of his novels, Heinlein talks about how there's this character that is named Lazarus, who shows up actually in a number of his books. And in this one book, at the end of the book, it's a long story about how he gets there, but he ends up in World War I. He ends up getting shot and killed in World War I. And then he ends up getting rescued from that. But in the course of being rescued from it, he's sort of in a near-death experience state. And in the near-death experience state, he imagines that he is in contact with God, the divine being. And the divine being says to him, "Checkmated yourself again, I see." Heinlein has a good way of expressing himself, but it really does say it. Like you said, it's a choice. So in that moment in time, he was choosing to feel dead. He was choosing to feel defeated, totally defeated. Can't win. That's a checkmate.
Yeah. Checkmate.
How often do we do that? How often do we checkmate ourselves?
Yeah, and check out literally of our lives completely. This won't change. Like, I remember moments in my life where I was like, I want to check out. Not that I was going to hurt myself and leave, but I was ready to check out mentally because I felt so defeated. And I needed that wake-up call. It also reminds me, this is kind of sort of on the same vein, but on a different topic. I feel it keeps coming up in my mind, so I feel like I should bring it up.
Okay.
My friend, who it's kismet, how her and I met. She was introduced to me through my business, my brokerage business, and then worked for me for a little bit. And we've stayed friends since she left the business. Anyway, she had a pregnancy, and she was, I don't know, I want to say like 7 months along. And then some things went wildly awful, bad. I don't know. Shit hit the fan. And anyway, she ended up losing the baby.
Wow.
And while she was going through that procedure of losing the baby, they had to put her under. And this was 5 years ago that this happened. And we were close back then also. And I didn't find out about what I'm going to tell you next until just recently, like 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay.
So they put her under, and she's in the hospital, and she's under, and she's going through surgery, and they do whatever they need to do because she hadn't delivered the placenta. That's what was the issue. And then they couldn't wake her up.
Oh
And
boy.
she's a healthy young woman, and they were having trouble waking her up. And so they eventually wake her up with much, effort. They wake
Right.
her up, and they ask her, do you know where you are? And she says, yeah, I'm at the office with Jody.
Oh wow.
And so, and I can't, and everybody laughs, like, no, no, honey, you're in the hospital. You're okay, whatever,
Mhm.
right? But her
Right.
last memory before she woke up was of her and I going through her life plan.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. So beautiful. So we've,
So like I guess
since,
last week she had a life review in this.
yeah,
Well, I guess we could term it a near death experience.
near death experience where
Yeah.
I showed up.
Yeah. Right.
which is which is the crazy thing. But when we channeled on all of this to figure out, she said, I can't remember what we talked about, but
Hmm.
I know that you were there, and we were, like, you were saying the words, we're going to review your life plan. And I was sitting
Wow.
on, like, the other side of my desk in my office, like everything looked exactly the way it would have, 5 years ago. She was in that space with me in the way that I look here. And when
Interesting.
we channeled about it, it was written as a contingency plan in, like, her life path. This is what
Oh,
what was downloaded, was that if she decided to check out, I was meant to meet her at a place that felt like home, which the office was a place for us where we felt like home, and go through this life path or plan with her and decide if she actually wanted to check out.
wow.
And what's wild about this too is I was like, I don't understand how I could have been a part of this. Like, I'm in the living, I wasn't experiencing anything near death, and I would have been awake. And she said, no, you weren't. You would have been sleeping. So it happened while
Oh,
I
I
was
see.
asleep,
I see.
and
Okay.
I must have astral traveled. I'm not really
Possibly.
sure how it all happened, but it reminded me of what you were talking about, checking out. So I think that there's opportunities where we consciously check out in our lives, but
Hmm.
then there's also on the spiritual realm, or in that, other side of things, where our soul gets an opportunity to have a conversation and say, do you really want to check out of this life?
Boy, we're busy.
I know.
Even when
Yeah,
we're
we're
asleep,
never
we're
done.
busy.
Yeah, exactly. We're going, doing.
My goodness. That's just
Ah.
something. Oh, something I wanted to ask you actually. We got a few minutes, so I can bring this up. I mentioned that the guest we had on Monday was a woman named June Edwards. She's a psychic medium who has
Mhm.
the ability to be startlingly detailed in what she can tell people about their loved ones or their past experiences, whatever. I mean, just little minute details and lots of them. She could just lay out an entire thing for people, and they say, "Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true." I mean, it's like one thing after another. So it's very, very.
Yeah.
It was a very eye-opening interview. But one of the things that she said was quite interesting, and she said it to me. I believe I can't remember if she said it during the show or after the show. But she said something that I wanted to check with you. She says, "Have you ever gotten a ringing in your ears?" And I said, "Yeah,
Mhm.
sure." She says, "That's a download." I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah, that
Mhm.
means you're receiving a download. You may not be aware of it yet, but it's going to process in your brain, and then at some point it's going to start feeding to you." And so I wanted to ask you, are you aware that when you get a download, do you get a ringing in your ears? Is that part of the way you experience it?
I think everybody experiences downloads a little bit differently, or can experience them differently.
Mhm.
For me, I will get a ringing in my ears, and
You
it's
will?
usually because I'm not listening.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a message that's trying to come through that I'm not listening to. So then I'll hear the ringing, and I'll be like, okay,
So it's like answer the
okay,
phone for
fine.
goodness sake.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's some sort of message that needs to come through. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
So for
so I'd
you,
agree with that.
the ringing side is a telephone that needs to be answered.
Absolutely. Because even though, a lot of people ask this all the time, like, oh, well, but you're a channel. And they ask my friend Heather this all the time, like, you have the answers, you have, access to the divine, and, all of these other things. Like, how could you ever be sad, or, whatever? We're still having a human experience and still do
Mm.
dumb shit,
Oh yeah.
like, ignore the signs that, are being given to you, ignore the messages. That's really when I hear the ringing in the ears, is when I am not open for a message that really needs to come through.
Wow. I guess that
Mhm.
really does illustrate the ultimate lesson is know yourself. And if
Mhm.
you don't know yourself, learn about yourself. Learn
Yeah.
what you learn what your body, your mind, your spirit already knows how to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Be your own best friend.
Yeah. The friend that I told you about that I had a phone call conversation with, she was telling me about a friend of hers that she was telling me his story, and apparently he's going through some rough stuff, and he has a very low levels of self-confidence, self-esteem, self-love, that kind of thing. And so she was telling me how all that played out, and I shared with her something that I had picked up by doing this show a lot, and that was to remind a person like that, if if they don't love themselves, how can they expect somebody else to love them? You have to love yourself first,
Mm.
right? But what goes along with that is it's not just loving yourself, it's listening to yourself. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Listening to your own
Yeah.
signals, listening to what your body tells you, listening to what your soul, your spirit, or your connection to the divine, or whatever you want to call it, listening to what that has to tell you,
Mhm.
listening to what your emotions are telling you, listening to
Yeah.
all of it, and then learning to understand what the hell all those messages mean.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? And maybe this is why, going back to where we kind of started this conversation about like feeling into things and our
Mm,
perception of like when things are good, we're not actually like feeling things as deeply.
hmm
But maybe this is why there's maybe an unbalanced, unproportionate side of, or disproportionate side of like difficult things that happen in our lives, because those are the moments where we actually go within and we listen. Because when things are like popping and you're excited, whatever, people tend to live outside of themselves, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. Things
we
are going
dismiss it.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not really looking for the answer. It's there's a country song that's out right now, and I don't remember it, but he talks about how the only time that he prays is when he needs something.
Mm, yeah.
Not in the good times, but in the bad when he needs something.
hmm hmm
And I think that's when we listen to ourselves the most, or that we go within potentially, is when those perceived negative things are happening.
So it's a good reminder that that's why we want to practice gratitude. That's why we want to
Yeah.
practice appreciation, because it's a way
Yeah.
of retraining ourselves in terms of what it is we're going to be noticing while we're in our now.
Yeah.
Training ourselves to notice the good stuff as well as the other stuff.
Hmm.
And ultimately,
Absolutely.
in the process, I think probably what's happening there as well. This is something I'm sure David will talk about next week. But in the process, as we're doing that, we're also training ourselves to realize that even the bad stuff isn't bad.
Yeah. It's
That's
all
also
an
important.
experience
That's what that
that we
appreciation
get to go through.
that we get to go through, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the things we have to remember, but they're worth
Hmm.
remembering. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So, well,
That's
it's
why I
sad
have
that we
lots
didn't
of
have our
sticky
guest.
notes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's sad we didn't have our guest today, but as usual, we
Mhm.
found something cool to investigate. So, thank you for coming up with that idea. It gave us a foundation for a good conversation. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.